Welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, and dedicated to silencing the chatter about what women should and shouldn't be doing as they age. Here to bring you stories about women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, women who are leading inspiring lives that make a difference to themselves and others, are Catherine Marino and Gail Zalitsky.
Hi, I'm Gail.
And I'm Catherine. We are the active voice of Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, and we're delighted to welcome you to today's episode. Each week, we showcase vital women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who continue to shatter the myths that we become invisible as we age. The 30-minute conversation with our guest focuses on several themes that we've agreed upon in advance.
Our guest today is Frances Fuller, age 91. She lives in California in the foothills of the Sierras. Frances grew up in Arkansas. Her family was very poor. From an early age, she loved writing, and after graduating high school, was recruited by an editor to write for the local newspaper. This led to a long career in journalism, a degree from Louisiana Tech, and another in religious education at Golden State Seminary in Berkeley, where she met her husband, Wayne. Both of them were committed to Christian service abroad. Together, they embarked on an adventurous missionary journey, which led to 32 years in Lebanon and Jordan, where they raised 5 children. A small Christian publishing program pressed her into writing materials needed in the Middle East. Her work was translated and published in Arabic. In 1970, she became the director of the publishing program, producing Christian literature for the entire Arab world. In this role, she established a legal publishing house, led in the training of local Christian writers, and produced such materials as History's First Arabic Concordance of Bible, and a cartoon strip Bible story bestseller, and hundreds of books basic to a Christian library. Most of this was accomplished under the stress of Lebanon's long civil war. After retirement, Frances wrote In Borrowed Houses, a true story of love and faith amidst war in Lebanon. And less than 1 year ago, Frances published Helping Yourself Grow Old, Things I Said to Myself When I Was Almost 90. It's such a wonderful title, Frances. Welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, Gail. I'm happy to participate.
Good. There are so many things we'd like to discuss with you. Perhaps we could begin by talking about how a degree in journalism led to Christian service and caused you to dedicate a good portion of your life to the Lebanese people.
Just about the time I began to graduate from Louisiana Tech with my degree in journalism, I realized that journalism was a tool with which I could do many different things. And I've wanted anything that I did to be consistent with who I was. And actually, my Christian faith was very important to me. It was fundamental to who I was. And I felt that journalism needed, anyway, another subject, something special that would be my field that I could write about. And so I thought that religion seemed to be the appropriate thing for me. And I chose the school in Berkeley because they offered me a job in the press relations office so that I could support myself while I was going to school. And it did turn out that a degree in journalism was very helpful because once we got to the Middle East, and actually we chose the Middle East because of the many Arab friends we made in Berkeley. A lot of students from the Arab world were studying at UC Berkeley, and we knew many and we had special rapport with them. And so we chose to go for under a lifetime appointment to the Middle East to do whatever we found to do that was a service to the people. And immediately, I found the opportunity. The first opportunity I had was that, we worked with groups of Americans who were there. There were, in Jordan, there were about 18 of us. Then after we went to Lebanon, there were 24. And I was always the press representative for the group, which meant that I was responsible for reporting to America what we were doing. And so I wrote news articles after news article all the time, and whatever was happening, it might be a battle going on in Jordan, and we were there observing, and it affected us in some way. So I had this material to write about. And then there was a small publishing program. It was not exactly a publishing house in Beirut, and they began to ask me to write materials for them. And so I wrote little books of a wide variety of subjects. And some of these were made into radio programs, and they were translated into Arabic also for publication as in little books. And then the director of the publishing house, of the publishing program, died. And we, at about that same time, decided to move back to Beirut, where we had lived 1 year doing Arabic studies. And there I became the director of the publishing program, and I established 2 legal publishing names, and I directed a staff of people, and we did really historic events, material, some of which you have named. At one point, we took on a very ambitious project to do something that had never been done in the Middle East, and that was for the people themselves to write the curriculum that they needed to teach their children and young people. And so I organized writing conferences, and we trained 125 people, Lebanese, Jordanians, Egyptians, and Palestinians, to write curriculum. And so it was the first time that Christian churches in the Middle East had a curriculum that was written in Arabic by Arabs for the Arab world. And so I used my journalism skills, and I learned as I went. I learned a lot more about writing and a lot more about publishing and everything as I went. I often was doing things I didn't quite know how to do, but my staff and I learned sometimes together how to do this, when sometimes we would get discouraged. And I would say, the good thing about this is that when we get it done, we will know how to do it. And in fact, well, it's the way life works. We learn by doing, and when we've done it, then we know how, and we can show someone else if someone else wants to know. But that's how it seems like a big leap in a way. And I will tell you that on the way, when I was just growing up, I was a teenager during World War II, and I had a great love for Ernie Pyle, who had a column in the newspaper every day. And he just wrote simple stories about simple men, sometimes men in trenches. And I sort of had this dream of being the female Ernie Pyle, who travel the world and write about simple people, simple stories about simple people. I loved that idea. And in fact, I got the chance to do that and more than that. And it was wonderful. And I should tell you also that I didn't mention this for some reason when I was giving you information about myself. But we had furloughs from the Middle East when we would come back home and visit family and do other things that we needed to do. And in one of those furlough years, actually in 1980, having become the director of the publishing house, I didn't want anymore to be the writer. I wanted to be the person who led other people to write. It was my responsibility to develop writers. And so I did a degree, a master's in English, which was really a writing program at Hollins University in Virginia. And I got that master's degree, and my purpose in doing it was to learn the process. How do we learn to write, and how can we help other people learn to write? And so I used that very much in the work that I did.
Wow. You're just amazing to me and so inspirational. Tell me a little bit about how it was to actually live in Lebanon and in Jordan. How was it to live there with children, and how did their education happen? And you said also that it was during their long civil war. So how did that affect you?
Actually, there are many things to mention. One is that we did have, in Amman, Jordan, there was a small American community school where our children studied. There was one year when the whole group of Americans worked together and taught our children. And really, they had amazing teachers that year, because I taught English, and I had a degree in journalism and a degree in English. Their science teacher was a doctor. And, that was just we had experts in all these different fields who had been appointed to do work there in Jordan. And we all taught the children together and shared the responsibilities. But mostly my children went to American schools. There was a very fine school in Beirut. My children felt that their education there was superior to what they would get in the average high school in California. Also, because they went at a young age to the Middle East, they naturally learned to speak Arabic because they needed to. The younger they were, the youngest ones learned Arabic more easily and became more fluent than the older ones. But all of them were young enough to learn with a lot of facility, and there were times when they could speak Arabic better than we could. That is, especially the street Arab, the language that children used on the playground. They could teach us things, And they loved their people. There was no problem at all. And actually, we had 5 children, and we didn't know when we went that the Arabs really take pride in big families. The Muslims believe that if God loves you, He's going to give you a lot of children. And so the children were a great asset to us in many ways. And they were, 3 of our 5 had red hair, which was very unusual, attracted a lot of attention, but everybody thought they were incredibly beautiful and were interested in them. And then in Lebanon, Lebanon, really speaks 3 languages. The legal languages of Lebanon are French and Arabic. And any educated person speaks at least French and Arabic. And so as a result of all of this, some of my children are trilingual. They speak French, Arabic, and English. And that hasn't been no handicap in this world. And so I don't know if I have answered your question. They did get we felt that they got good education. They did have exposure to some fearful situations. They know the sound of gunfire. They have seen injured people. Our eldest son once, during the conflicts in Jordan, he saw a child who had stepped on a landmine, and it affected him so deeply. He was like 13 years old at the time, and he told us, no one is ever going to make me do that. I said, do what? What do you mean? And he said, no one is ever going to make me plant a mine that a little boy might step on. And so because of their experiences, my children tend to be very anti-war and very peace-loving. And at the same time, you know, all of them came to the States when they were 18 years old. They all came to the States to go to college, and didn't live with us anymore. And in fact, our two youngest children we sent to Athens, to the American Academy in Athens, because the war had started in Lebanon, and we literally, in the spring of 1975, were going out on the balcony in the morning and listening to the gunfire before we would decide to send the children to school or not, because we needed to know what direction the gunfire was, what direction are they fighting in. And we felt that we could endure the situation, but if we didn't have to worry about our children. And so our youngest two very bravely went off to Athens and studied. And we would meet, the war was in Lebanon, and we would meet in Jordan for their holidays. And but they supported us through it all. It was hard for them to be in America, and we were still in the war in Lebanon. But they never ceased to support us. They understood why we were there. They knew our hearts were in it, and they knew that. I mean, they loved Lebanon too. So they knew better than the ordinary American listening to the news. They knew that, okay, there's fighting in this one place, but that doesn't mean there's fighting everywhere. And our parents are okay, they know what they're doing. So we had that. That was a tremendous help that they gave us by not feeling that we should leave and come home.
And when did you actually come home for good?
Well, first we retired in 1995. But, you know, the American State Department made Americans leave Lebanon in 1987. And when that happened, we went over to the island of Cyprus, which is like an overnight boat ride on a ferry. And I was able to go in and out of Lebanon using just my Lebanese ID card. We learned that the United States government couldn't actually tell us where we could go. They could only tell us where we could use their passport. And so long as we didn't get our passport stamped, we could go to Lebanon. And so and the publishing house was an international thing. And I needed to travel a lot anyway, so I could travel to Egypt and Jordan and other places from Cyprus easily. And it worked. It was hard. It was very hard, but it worked, and we got our job done, which was the important thing.
Right, right. And then you wrote 2 books, and
Yes,
we really would love to know about your second book. The first book, of course, was In Borrowed Houses, a true story of love and faith amidst war in Lebanon.
right.
But the second one is so intriguing. Well, I'm sure the first one is too, but the second one is really intriguing to me, and that is helping yourself grow old and what you think about aging now that you are over 90. What made you decide to do that, Frances?
Well, actually, when I began writing it, I didn't realize that I was writing a book. I have always written things in order to think. If I need to think something through, I sit down and I write it out. And as soon as I write out, I mean, it might be nothing but my opinion. And as soon as I write it out, it becomes somehow objective. And I can look at it critically, and I can change my mind. I can say that's not very good. I don't like that idea. Something's wrong with it. So I was literally talking to myself. My first title for the book was Things I Said to Myself, because that's literally what it was. I was writing for myself, and then I sent pieces of it to a very close friend, someone I have not seen for many years, but we have always maintained a close connection. And I sent her some of these, and she said, Frances, everybody will identify with this. You need to share this. And then I joined a little writing group where there were 2 other women who were writing. Both of them were writing novels, and they also assured me that that people would love it and that they would identify. And actually, I did some research, and I found that there are many, many, many books on aging. Mm-hmm. There are so many, you'd be astonished how many they are. But most of them were written by sociologists, gerontologists, doctors, people who never were old, actually. It is a little bit unusual to find a book that is written by the person who is experiencing the difficulties of aging. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I didn't start doing this until actually my husband died, and on the second day of June in 2017. And the first words that I wrote were about my grief. And I wrote a very big section on grief. And but I didn't know when I wrote it that I was writing it for anyone else. And then, I had to make some changes when I realized, okay, I'm willing to make this into a book and publish it. I did make some adjustments to that, I'm sure, but I began with, it really came out of my heart, and it almost became an ongoing story that I didn't know what the conclusion would be. Because I don't know today what will happen tomorrow. And I could only say what happened up till today, And so I wrote about little things, and some things turned out to be quite funny, and it became a real outlet for me to write these things. And I realized that I really was making decisions about how I wanted to live. I did it exactly realize I was old until my husband died. I think that's why I never wrote anything like that until after he died. And but two people compensate one another for what they're missing, and so when you're left alone, suddenly there are things you can't do and no one does for you, and so that causes you to feel kind of inept, and you start to think, my goodness, I'm so old, that's my problem. And but I did really a lot of soul searching, and I have had a wonderful response to the book, and I feel that the reason for this, I don't think my book is a great writing accomplishment, but it's chatty, it's personal, it's real simple, easy to read, and people identify. And we all have known for half a century that um, what is most personal is most universal. And I believe that's why people love my book, because it's just me. It's just my story about being old. It might not be exactly like that for you, but it connects. It's going to connect with what you feel because it's close enough. And it has all helped me to see. I mean, I can see what's hard about getting really old, and at the same time, I have so much appreciation now for what's really wonderful about it, because I find that the best thing about being old is being able to look back and see where I've been,
Mhm.
and see what contribution did I make to the world, to other people's lives. What did I do with my gifts? And it's actually, there's kind of a puzzle in it for me, and there may be for a lot of other people. But I was born in 1929. That's the year that the Great Depression started. And we were so poor that I didn't have any books in my home. When I was a child, I had no books. The Sears and Roebuck catalog was the closest thing to a book that I had when I was a child. And my mother had only a fourth grade education. She was barely literate. And so I never had a bedtime story. There was no concept of a bedtime story. And when I went to school, um, I failed the first time I had a chance to learn to read. We had these little, what they called our reader, and the books that I had all the way through school belonged to the state of Arkansas. They didn't belong to me. And when I had gone through it, I had to give it back to the state. And I can remember a perpetual grief because I'm giving back the books that I have loved so much. But anyway, in the very first little reader, there was a picture on every page, and then under the picture, just one line of type. And at the end of the day, the teacher we would all open our books, and she would read us that one line, and we would turn the page, and she would read us that line under that picture. And I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 pictures we did in a day. I was reading pictures. I thought what she was saying somehow came out of the pictures. I didn't get the point of the line in the picture.
Huh?
And I went home and I could read it to my mother because I could open it and tell her exactly what was written under every picture. And then I could go back to school the next day. And so I fooled my mother, I fooled the teacher, I fooled myself because I thought I was reading. And I was only like memorizing what the teacher said when she looked at the pictures.
Sure. Right.
And so at the end of the book, there was one page that was just a column of words. It was the vocabulary that was in the little book. And I did not know a single word. And that's when I was discovered. And the teacher put everybody else in book 2 and sat down with me alone and taught me to read.
You know, we could go on forever. Your stories are just fascinating.
Well, I just really wanted to make the point is that this little girl who had no books in her home and a barely literate mother became a publisher, leading a whole community of Christian Arabs to create their own literature in the Arabic language. I mean, to me, it's a miracle what God takes and uses. And it's difficult to understand.
Yes. And who you are today. Look how fluent you are and how capable you are of discussing all of this and making so much sense. It's really an absolute treat to have you on the show and to hear about your long journey. I can't wait to read Helping Yourself Grow Old, and I know that we'll be in contact with you many times in the future.
One of my favorite things that you said, Frances, is when we get it done, we'll know how to do it. That seems to be a wonderful theme throughout your life.
Wonderful. Well, I so enjoyed talking with you, and I really like what you're doing, and I will be following it too.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And listeners, we want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts in our Facebook group at Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined. Become an active participant in our community. Join us at our Zoom events. You can access our weekly Wednesday podcasts. And if you know a vital woman over 70 who would be a great guest, please recommend her to us at womenover70.com. See you next Wednesday on Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined.
Thank you for listening to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined. If you like what you've heard today, please subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. In what ways are you shattering the myth that women over 70 are no longer relevant or visible? How are you celebrating aging? Join with us. Make your voice heard. Find us at womenover70.com.